All right. So, talking about transport in humans, the last time we talked about the way to monitor activity of the heart. So, one is the physical way of doing it, and give them headings perhaps, right? So, this is the physical way of monitoring activity and just checking for a pulse, right? This is the auditory way. They're not going to ask you what the physical or auditory way is, right? But obviously you're physically checking movement, you are listening for sounds. And the third one, right, is the electric. You're checking for electric signals generated from the impulse of the heart, the beating of the heart. So there are three ways of doing that: the pulse, the heart sounds, and the ECG or the electrocardiogram. Then we talked about the different blood vessels, the arteries with their narrow lumen and muscular elastic walls, the capillaries that are microscopic and single-celled walls, and then the veins that have wider lumens uh, and more of fibrous tissue, and valves, right? And veins are the ones carrying blood towards the heart, and most of them carry deoxygenated blood except for the pulmonary vein. Uh, and arteries are the ones carrying blood away from the heart, and most of them carry uh, oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery. Then certain major arteries and veins, you got the hepatic artery that goes to the liver and then exits as the hepatic vein. You've got the hepatic portal vein going between the small intestine and the liver. You've got the renal arteries going into the kidneys and then leaving, and so there are two kidneys, and you're going to have two arteries and two veins. The coronary artery supplying the heart, the pulmonary arteries supplying each lung, and then the pulmonary veins coming back from each lung, joining up together and entering the heart as one. Those are some of the major ones. Then blood, the components of the blood, you've got RBCs, which are the oxygen carriers. They don't have a nucleus, right? They have hemoglobin to bind with the oxygen to make oxyhemoglobin. And they have a lifespan of 4 months. They're replaced on a daily basis. And in about 4 months, you have all new red blood cells from any point you start counting. Then you got the white blood cells, and they're much, much lesser than the red blood cells in number. And they are responsible for the body's immune system, right? Defense against disease. And they're more fluid, so they can move through capillary walls and move between body cells, tissues, and they may be present among the body cells as well. There are two types: the phagocytes, which perform phagocytosis, which is engulfing pathogens and digesting them, or not pathogens, perhaps old or damaged or diseased cells. Lymphocytes produce antibodies which mark pathogens or mark cells that have been infected or diseased or damaged in some way that need to be removed. And so these lymphocytes call in the phagocytes to act. Then you've got the platelets, and these are pieces of blood cells formed in the red bone marrow. The white blood cells and the red blood cells are all formed in the bone marrow, and they are involved in clotting of blood, which stops bleeding and also prevents pathogens from entering. But as far as clotting is concerned, when a blood vessel gets damaged, platelets clump together to block the capillary. A soluble plasma protein called fibrinogen becomes, it's converted into its insoluble form called fibrin. It forms a net that traps red blood cells in it, and so that stops the flow of blood out. It stops the bleeding and also the entry of unwanted particles, whether it be pathogens or dust or anything else. And then plasma is the liquid part of the blood. It is mostly water, right? But it carries everything in it. So the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the nutrients, hormones, the excretory products such as carbon dioxide and urea. And the liver and kidney play a major role in uh, you know, maintaining the composition of the blood plasma. Now, with that review, we are going to move on to talking about heart disease, or to be more particular, coronary heart disease. Right? Why coronary? Because it has to do with the coronary arteries that supply blood to the heart tissue. So they start off by telling us that over a lifetime, right, fat deposits form in our arteries, right, and this happens over time. So everyone's got some amount of these deposits. Obviously, right, the older you are, the more you have them. Also, depending on your diet and your lifestyle. And so these fat deposits are called an atheroma. Right? And so obviously if you've got these deposits on the lining of the arteries, then they would reduce the lumen size available for the blood to pass. Right? And so they can sort of build up and join up to effectively completely block a blood vessel. So unless what that would do, right, is obviously it will starve the area that the blood vessel is supplying, uh, and in particular, right, it will starve it of oxygen. So to block blood flow, obviously, and oxygen supply, and that's obviously going to cause harm. Now, when this happens with the coronary arteries, right, which are supplying the heart, then the heart muscles may stop beating. And that is a heart attack. And in many cases, it results in muscle death. So some percentage of the heart muscles may end up dying because obviously they're starved, right? So they're suffocating in a sense, right? Then there's no oxygen, right? And so the muscles are going to suffocate. And when you suffocate, you die. And so obviously it didn't happen all of a sudden. It's been happening over time, right? So the supply became so less that the heart just couldn't keep up. In the case of the heart, if it happens somewhere else, then obviously it's going to cause damage to that part of the body or that organ. Achha, why this happens not simply because of the fat deposit, but what happens is the fat deposits, the edges or the fat deposits themselves can be rough.
In this case, are we talking about like cholesterol?
Cholesterol, right? The what's called the bad cholesterol, the LDL, I believe, right? Wait, let me just look at it. I keep confusing those two.
So like over here,
Just a sec. Yeah, so right, it is LDL, low density lipoprotein, and so it builds up in the artery walls. So what was your question?
so like why does high cholesterol like results in heart attack?
Well, because there's more, you, like cholesterol is lipid, right? And so the body does not like it stores lipids. So lipids, there you've got adipose tissue, which are fat cells where it can store, but it can also start depositing over your organs and inside your blood vessels. So when, like, it's one thing if you're in consuming high calorie food in the sense that there's a lot of sugar in it, right? And so the sugar that's required by the body is utilized, some of it is stored as glycogen, and then the one that's even in more excess is converted to fats and stored as fats, right? But if you're consuming fats directly, right, then for one thing, if you're consuming sugar as well, we're not going to like keto diet thing, because you need to sort of help your body move from using sugars to moving fats. But if you're consuming lots of fats, so you're consuming cholesterols in your foods, then the body is going to store them. And again, right, so they'll be stored in the right storage areas, right? Some areas like the belly or the hips or the thighs, or wherever else, right? And then they're also going to get stored over the organs, so that's going to put pressure on the organs like your kidneys and your liver and all that. And they're going to start building up in your arteries as well, your blood vessels. So that's why it's bad. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so these fat deposits are rough, and so when the red blood cells, right, when blood is flowing over them, right, it can cause damage, and it can cause a blood clot to form.
Like, are we talking about lipids over here, or
No, no, no. I
like
mean,
fats and
it like,
lipids? No.
well, no, yes. When we say like lipids is the general term which includes fats and oils. In the case, right, in your body, the lipids are being deposited as fat, so solids at room temperature, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, so that's going to cause a blood clot to form in the vessel, and that is what blocks the blood supply, right? So it's not the fat that's doing it directly, so to speak, right? But as a consequence of that buildup. And so why is the blood clot forming? Because when the lumen gets narrow, when the passage becomes narrower, right, blood needs to force its way through. It right, and it's coming under pressure in an artery, and so it rubs and abrases it's abrasive against the rough surface of the fat deposit, and so it gets damaged, right? And that damage results in a blood clot. Okay.
Yes.
Now, that's what would happen with the heart if, in case, right, a blood clot happens somewhere else, or it, you know, travels through the system and, for example, goes into the brain, right? Then it can cause what we know as a stroke, right, which is a lack of oxygen supply to the brain, right? So the blood clot affecting the brain can result in a stroke, which is obviously perhaps even more severe than a heart attack, possibly, right? Debatable, right? But yes. So obviously, this doesn't happen all of a sudden, it happens over time. And what a person can, you know, feel initially is pain in the chest during physical exertion. Why during physical exertion? Because that is when there is more demand for oxygen, right? So exercise or hard work. And so if you feel a pain in the chest when you are, right, doing something that is physically intensive, that might be a warning that there's something wrong, right? And so you need to get that checked and improve your diet and something, right? So take advice from a doctor. Hopefully not medication immediately, but yes, right? So to avoid going to the extent of having a heart attack. Now, what are the risk factors? We are familiar with some. I think I mentioned them in passing, right? So diet, obviously, and right, lifestyle. So the increased risk can be inherited, possibly. So in some people, right, the atheroma and then the blood clot happens over time.
What is the
Rega-
ethanol?
huh?
What is the ethanol?
Atheroma. Atheroma is the name
Ethanol.
for the fat deposit in the artery.
Okay.
Right, but then there are many external uh, factors that can be in our control, right, which include our diet and lifestyle. So obviously the first is diet, and we've covered human nutrition. So having you know balanced diet, if we have too much animal fat or too many calories, with lots of animal fat in our diet, right, and that's where the cholesterol comes in. We've got too many calories, and so those are being converted to fats, and that's going to lead to obesity, right, which is going to lead to all of this more, right? So again, right, it might happen in someone who is apparently healthy, but with age, right, these things tend to happen as well. So people who are not obese and have healthy lifestyles may end up getting heart attack as well. But if you're not having a healthy lifestyle and you are obese, then the risk just goes up. That's the point to be made over here. Right, and so what happens is, obviously, a person who's obese finds it more difficult to exercise or under participate in any physically demanding work, exercise, and so they stay away from it. And when they do, uh, if the arteries are blocked, the blood flow is restricted, and so there's a greater risk of a heart attack. Then there's stress, right, and emotional stress leads to higher blood pressure, and that may increase the rate at which atheromas are formed. Atheroma formation. Then you've got smoking. And so we're talking about cigarettes. The book is talking about cigarettes, but given you know what's going on today, e-cigarettes, right? They're all the rage amongst teenagers and college students and university students, and they think it's safe. And the marketing is super deceptive because it says that it is less harmful than cigarettes. So a cigarette has like 7,000 chemicals in it, harmful chemicals, right? Only some of them are highlighted, such as nicotine or tar or whatever, right? But
Like
there,
what material is cigarette like actually has that causes them?
huh?
Like what thing like a cigarette has that causes diseases and all?
Tar is a major factor, right?
Okay.
Tar, carbon monoxide, right? Nicotine. So all of these have an effect.
Also
Tar,
nicotine.
Nicotine is again a chemical that's present in cigarette smoke, right? Well, not smoke, like cigarette itself. So when you it burns, you inhale it, and so it goes into your body, into your lungs, right? It has its effects. But one of the major players in this case is tar, right?
Okay.
And so not only does it start depositing, it sort of makes your arteries harder, less elastic. And so when the blood is flowing under pressure, they can't cope with the pressure, and so that's going to cause damage, obviously. And right, it sort of speeds up and promotes the buildup of fat, as well as tar depositing itself. So there are a lot of problems with it. So as for the e-cigarettes, I was saying that a regular cigarette has 7,000 or more harmful chemicals in it, and e-cigarettes are promoted as being safer, right? They're not as bad, and that's true. But that is such a deceptive way of putting it, because in relative terms, right, yes, they've got lesser chemicals, but how less? According to studies, e-cigarettes still have, with everything, like the way they're designed, they still have 2,000 or so harmful chemicals, and that is not a small number by any means, right? We're talking about
Uh,
2,000, right? And
mhm.
so in the long run, right, e-cigarettes may end up being more harmful than regular cigarettes, because you are taking that in larger amounts, thinking that, oh, it doesn't have the kind of effect that it does. So you're taking in more of the chemical, and it's going to build up, right?
Yeah.
So e-cigarettes or vapes, right? They're called vapes now. So it's the same thing. Vapes are e-cigarettes, right? They've just been so hyped and made fashionable that we don't see them as a bad thing. But they're,
And like how this like stress messes up our hormones and all.
yes, and so stress causes release of hormones which affect blood pressure and our metabolism and everything, and that will affect the development of, among other things, it will affect the development of atheromas in the arteries.
Why does that? Like,
Because when the body is stressed, it means that the brain feels that you are in danger, and so it releases
okay,
relevant hormones to protect you, right? So it's one of those is adrenaline, and adrenaline is known as the fight or flight hormone, right? So you either face what is happening, or you escape and save your life. And the effects of
okay,
adrenaline when you're under stress, so nothing's happening to you physically, but it's all like, I wouldn't say it's like all in your head to downplay it, but you are under like attack mentally, right, because of something. And
yeah,
so the body detects as danger. Adrenaline, among other things, is released, and right, so it elevates your blood pressure, it affects your metabolism, right, blood glucose, everything, right, muscle contraction. And normally, like I said, it happens in situations where you're in danger, so either you face your danger and get rid of it, or you run away and save your life. And so that is only for like a short period. If you remain in stress for longer periods of time, your blood pressure is always elevated, your metabolism is always affected, your muscle contractions affected, your blood glucose is affected, right, for extended periods of time, which the body it's not supposed to be that way. And so when that happens for longer periods of time, it's going to have harmful effects. Okay.
okay, yes,
So yeah, smoking. So according to studies, smokers are 2 or 3 times more likely to die from heart attack than non-smokers of a similar age. Right? 2 to 3 times. So I'm putting an X over there for times. More likely to die of heart attack than non-smokers of similar age. Right? And other than that, like you mentioned, like you've got tar, and nicotine, and the one the book mentions is carbon monoxide, which is super deadly, right? It really reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood overall, right? So a smoker, even if they have to like walk fast or climb a set of stairs, which is not the most physically demanding thing you can do, they're completely out of breath, right? And so that damage that happens because of these will lead to the formation of atheromas. We mentioned hereditary, so it could just be genetics, right? And so nothing can be done to control it, but then we can, sort of adjust our lifestyles to, reduce the effects. Then there's age and gender, right? So it's more likely to happen as we get older. And according to studies, uh, males are more at risk than females, right? It may be because males perhaps have a less healthier lifestyle than females, and it's also that the female hormone estrogen offers them some protection from heart disease until later life. So estrogen offers females some protection from heart disease.
Like females also have the male hormone, testosterone.
To a small extent, yes.
Okay.
But it's not highlighted as a female hormone, right? So the main female hormones are like estrogen, progesterone, and the main male hormone is testosterone.
But like, what if a female has like a large amount of the male hormone?
Then you would notice, like, if it happened later on in life or whenever, you would notice changes that you would normally see in a male, in the sense that they might have more hair on their body. Perhaps, women tend to have hair on their upper lip, so you might notice more than usual, deepening of their voice, perhaps, and some other changes, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that happens. Uh, if the thought is that, oh, they're going to turn into men, no, that's not going to happen. But the hormone will have its effects, right? So deepening of voice, maybe if it happened earlier in life, they might develop, you know, broader physical structures, their bones and everything. Maple it like, if you see a lady who's got like a broader build, it's not necessarily it's because of testosterone, could be other reasons, whatever, like, but testosterone can have that effect as well. So a deeper voice, more hair, and you know perhaps less of the more feministic characteristics, right? Like the emotional sensitivities and uh, other things that women tend to like or do. Okay. Then lifestyle, obviously, right? So the book says sedentary lifestyle, which sedentary basically means you're not doing much, you're just, right, you're not physically active. And so that's not good, no matter what your age is, especially if the older you get, because you're not utilizing everything that you're doing. And a reason for that is, right, lack of exercise, right? So overall your blood flow will be slower. So, and this may allow atheromas to form, although the book mentions that there is no clear evidence of this happening, so it's just like maybe an educated guess. And so how do you prevent coronary heart disease? Well, you not do all the things that will cause it. You don't smoke, you have a balanced diet, you have a healthy lifestyle. You can't do anything about genetics, you can't do anything about age and gender, right? But yeah, so you take care of these things. And what happens with regular exercise? It affects your muscles, it tones your skeletal muscles, which are the ones with your bones, and makes them stronger. And it also tones your heart muscles. And so what it does is it affects your blood. It leads to improved blood flow overall. Okay, any questions?
No.
Right, and we are done with chapter 11. So we do have time left. Shall we move on to chapter 12?
Mm,
Yes?
yeah.
Okay. So chapter 12,
You're like
disease.
just gonna give the intro, no?
Huh?
You're just gonna give the intro of this chapter, right?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so when you talk about disease and immunity, the first thing that comes to mind is what causes disease and how is it spread, right? And so the main factors for the cause of disease are pathogens, which are disease causing microorganisms, and how they're spread. I mean, disease can happen for other reasons as well that do not involve microorganisms, but we're not talking about those kind of diseases at the moment. We're talking about the ones like, for example, right, the common cold, the influenza, right, or the chicken pox, or uh, you know, uh, measles, for example. So a pathogen is basically a disease causing microorganism. Why are we sick? Right, because not all microorganisms, not all of them are harmful to humans. Not all of them are causing disease. In fact, in your body, throughout your body, you have an entire population of different microorganisms that are beneficial to you. We actually, uh, when we're talking about digestion, you've got certain bacteria in your large intestine which can, to some extent, digest the cellulose, right? Uh, of the fiber, the roughage that we consume, and convert it to fats. So it's helping us, right? And then transmission. So transmission means going from one to the other, right? Being passed on. And so a transmissible disease is one that can be transferred and passed on from one individual to the next, right? Transmissible disease is one in which the pathogen can be passed from one host to the next. The term host, right, is the organism that is infected by the pathogen. Okay, I'll introduce some more. Uh, a carrier is an individual in the case of humans, right, or an organism that has the pathogen in the body but is not infected. So they're not, by infected means, right, showing symptoms of disease. And so what the carrier can do is that they can be a point of transmission, can transmit the disease. So they're not infected, but they can pass it on to new host, right? So if the other person gets infected, otherwise they'll also be carriers. And then you have what's called a vector, right? So vector is an organism, not human, right? That plays a role in transmitting a pathogen from one host to the next. They are not infected by the pathogen themselves. Okay, now how is a vector different from a carrier? Right? A carrier can be infected, but they're not. Right? So for example, people around me have the cold, right? They've got the influenza. I'm not showing symptoms of influenza. I don't know I have the virus with me as well. So I go somewhere else, maybe I sneeze, I cough, I shake hands, right? I've got some of those viruses on my hand, or whatever happens, we share like a glass of water or something, and that virus is transferred to someone else, right? It's transferred through me, and so the other person gets ill. And right, in that case, I'm a carrier. Why am I a carrier? I'm not a vector. For one thing, I'm human, right? So the term vector is used for non-human organisms. Secondly, right, as a human, I can potentially fall ill because of the effects of the pathogen. I can get the disease. I'm just not getting it for whatever reason. That makes me a carrier, right? But I can fall ill. It can happen to me later on. I can get, the pathogen can, become active, or whatever was preventing the disease to take effect, right? Well, now it's happening. In the case of a vector, the vector is not affected by the pathogen at all. Its role is to transfer the pathogen from one host to the other, and that's it, right? There is no chance. The pathogen is not aimed towards infecting the vector, because the vector is important in the transmission, right? So that's how the natural system is set up. So do you understand the difference between vector and carrier?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, what else? Huh. So, right, you can have pathogenic bacteria. So there are three different types. Well, more than three actually, but you can have many different types of pathogens. You can have bacteria, you can have fungi, you can have viruses, right? You can have protozoa. So examples of diseases caused by these guys. So for example, right, if you heard of tetanus, right? So or diarrhea or uh, cholera. So those are caused by bacteria. Cholera, for example, right? Athlete's foot is a skin disease, right? Which is caused by fungus. Viruses, so right, influenza, and there are many others. Protozoa, you got malaria. And these are just examples. You may need to remember some examples of what's going on, right? Then it's not only humans, but right, other animals and plants as well. So there are diseases for plants where viruses or fungi or bacteria affect plants and they can lead to the death of the organism. Okay, so examples of viruses for plants are, for example, the tobacco mosaic virus, and this affects tomato plants as well as tobacco plants, right? Tomato and tobacco plants, right? Then you got fungi that grow on plants and then they're digested and right. So bracket fungus, for example. And so these are examples. There's like a list and everything. There are many different types, and the reason, right? Why do these guys cause infection? So they somehow disturb the internal working of the organism if they're affecting it from the inside. So in case of humans, right, the viruses or right fungi or they disturb the internal working. In case of bacteria, bacteria produce toxins, so basically poisons, right? Toxins for us, obviously. So they're toxic to us, they're poisonous to us. And so when you've got poisons in our cells, the cells are affected, they're either damaged or they die, and that leads to disease, right? Viruses and fungi work in other ways. And then finally, right, the these pathogens, when you go on to treat them with medication, they can and have to, like an alarming extent, become resistant to treatment. So they mutate,
Resistance mean like they cannot be cured.
meaning that the medicine no longer works, it no longer has an effect on them, and that's obviously problematic, right?
Yes.
And this can again happen with human pathogens, or it can happen with plant pathogens, or it can happen with animal pathogens, like pathogens in general, right?
Like every living being has pathogens in them.
Not in them, right? If you have a pathogen in you, then
Like
yeah, well, if it's a living being, it is likely to get some sort of disease.
yeah.
Okay. In fact,
Like it is.
in fact, there are like among microorganisms, there are, for example, viruses that infect bacteria, right? So even over there,
Um.
yeah,
Yeah. It is said now that if you got like a disease one time, then you won't get it again.
it is likely that you won't get this exact same thing again, and that is where the immune system comes in. If we could talk, so when we reach the point where we're talking about immunity, we were just talking about disease at the moment,
Okay.
right? So when we talk about immunity, we'll talk about how that happens. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll stop here, and we can carry on with this the next class, inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right.
Allah.
Allah Hafiz.